Today's session is Resilient Families with Dr. Karim Martinez. My name is Erika Acosta, and I'm so glad that you're joining us. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for your time. We're going to spend some time thinking and talking about resilient families and self-care and caring for our students, caring for our children, caring for our own selves, which is so important.
My name is Karim Martinez, and I'm an Extension Family Life Specialist. And so if you're not familiar with the Cooperative Extension Service, we actually do outreach and community education. So we provide information on family health and wellness, on 4-H youth development, on agriculture and horticulture. And so I was invited to talk about today was resilient families. And so what I'm going to highlight are briefly talking about how stress affects our brain and our body. And then we'll talk about some strategies that families can, and actually it can be for your students, it can be for your families. This information is good for everyone, but it's really how to build that resilience. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. So I like memes. I enjoy memes. I feel like I can relate to some of them. And I found the meme on the left when the pandemic first started. So it was in April or May of 2020. And I swear I felt like that. You know, every day was just a new challenge. And I thought that by now this meme wouldn't be relevant, but I still feel like we're in that same challenging situation. And so I found the meme on the right where it seems like 2021 is just a continuation of 2020. And so I wanted to check in with you all to see if you're feeling like this too. You know, what stressors have you been experiencing? Or maybe the families that you work with, what are they experiencing? I know when I've been speaking to my own colleagues and my own family and friends, what we talk about is that there's just so many stressors piling up on us. And some of them are stresses that we haven't ever experienced in the past. So not only are they new, but it's just this pile up. So it just seems like it's this chronic stress that's going on that just it's continuing, right? It's we're months into this and you know, things are getting better, but still challenging.
I'm seeing in the chat that we have a lot of challenges when it comes to helping our own children who might be learning at home and us being online helping our own students. So I know that juggling that has been quite a challenge. Another one, of course, is then helping kids who may not be logging in, who are not attending. So helping kids without really being able to help them in person has had its challenges.
Right. Yes. Thank you so much for sharing. And we are going to talk about that challenge of balancing work and family and school and everything happening all in one place. So we'll definitely get to that. So the first step to building resilience, you know, when we're faced with all of these very challenging stressors in our lives, is to understand how does our brain respond to stress. And so I'm going to play a short video clip, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the concepts in it. So here's a short clip, and hopefully you all can hear the sound.
Humans, like all species, have self-protective mechanisms to help us survive. Our fight, flight, or freeze survival response, the FFF for short, is designed to mobilize our brain and body to fight an enemy, run from an avalanche, or freeze to hide from a predator. Our brain sometimes misinterprets safe situations as dangerous and can set off false alarms. When the amygdala, our brain's watchdog, senses and barks danger, our body enters survival mode quicker than our rational mind can react, leaving it trying to figure out why we feel in mortal danger. When the FFF alarm is sounded, we start to breathe more quickly and shallow, causing hyperventilation, and our heart starts beating very fast. These changes can cause strong chest pain, which many people interpret as symptoms of a heart attack, when in fact it's just a result of the FFF activation, which can be relieved through breathing exercises. As a way of getting you ready for action, blood is diverted towards the major muscle groups. Blood flows away from our digestive system, causing the bladder to relax, and we might feel the need to pee. The mouth goes dry, nausea can occur, and we get the butterflies feeling in our stomach. Blood also rushes from extremities, leaving us with cold hands, but often sweaty palms as the action-ready body starts sweating to avoid overheating. Legs and hands can start trembling and feel weak, while tension starts building in big muscles like the thighs, neck, and shoulders. In our head, FFF alarms cause our brain to focus on negative memories, probably so it can scan them to avoid danger and negative outcomes. We get tunnel vision as our pupils dilate to increase our focus and long vision, but as a result, we lose our peripheral vision. FFF activation also reduces our ability to recognize differences in facial expressions. Too much oxygen and too little CO2 can result in dizziness or lightheadedness, which many people interpret as signs that they might faint. But because fainting is caused by a drastic drop in blood pressure, and because the FFF increases both our heart rate and blood pressure, it's nearly impossible to faint when this happens. Over time, depression, anxiety, and high levels of stress all harm the brain's ability to slow or cancel false FFF activations, causing them to happen more often. Knowing the symptoms of false activations makes it easier to recognize and reduce their effects.
Okay, so that was just a short video clip, but I wanted to highlight a couple of the concepts in there. So the video actually talked about two types of a stress response. And the first one I wanted to highlight is called a survival stress response. So this is in response to an actual life-threatening situation. So you can think of this as when our brain goes into survival mode, right? The video said FFF, so that's our fight, flight, or freeze response. And what happens when we go into this survival mode is we have powerful chemicals. So things like adrenaline and cortisol are released. So that's why our heart rate goes up, our blood pressure goes up. We even have glucose released because that's to help you be able to run away from danger, or to, the adrenaline's there to help you fight if you have to fight whatever that danger is. So this type of stress is actually good because it can help us in that dangerous situation. What it does is, since you go into survival mode, you're not thinking, you're just reacting. And so that actually helps us not be afraid, and we just sort of react. So that's the survival stress. Now the challenge is that it's not meant to be activated all the time. And so I wanted to highlight the second one, which the video called the false FFF. It can also be called the pseudo survival stress. So this is when you have a survival stress response to a non-life threatening situation. So some examples on the slide here might be if you're in a really long line in traffic and there's might be some road rage, or maybe somebody cuts you off and you get really angry or upset. Another example might be staying in line and you have somewhere else to be, and so you get frustrated, and then it activates that stress response, right? We get angry or upset. Now the problem is that our brain, it can't really tell the difference between stress from a life-threatening situation and a non-life-threatening situation. So in either situation, we're having adrenaline and cortisol flooding our body. So like I mentioned before, this stress response, it's not meant to be activated all the time, because having that flood of chemicals is actually harmful to us. So you may have already heard how having those stress hormones flooding our body, it can cause inflammation in our cells, it can cause damage to them, which is why when we have that stress that's ongoing and we're just having that stress response all the time, we're finding that that's connected to negative health outcomes really across the lifespan. But some of the examples of some of the health consequences that come from chronic stress are things like hypertension, obesity. There's an increased risk of certain cancers, increased risk of diabetes. There's also an increase in the risk of developing anxiety and depression. So that was also mentioned in the video. And on a side note, I also wanted to mention, especially since this is for educators, that when we go into survival mode, remember I mentioned how you're not thinking, right? You're just reacting. So what it does is we're not engaged in our rational part of our brain when we have that stress response going on, especially when have that really strong stress response. And so it makes it harder to focus, it makes it harder to learn. So those same neural pathways that we use for learning get used for stress. And so you may have been experiencing this to yourself or with your students. I know even for me, reading seems to take a lot longer. It's harder for me to focus on things. Everything's taking a little bit longer. And I think it's just because of this chronic stress that we're all under at this time. So I just wanted to mention that. So that's the pseudo survival stress. So again, either way, if we're stressed out, we're having all of those chemicals flood our body. So how do we start building resilience? Well, when I talk about resilience, here are a couple of definitions. So it can be the ability to recover quickly from or adjust easily to difficulties, or the ability to become strong, healthy, or successful again after something bad happens. And I do have a presentation, and that was really focused more on individual level ways of building resilience. And so we do have that recording available for you all. But what I'd like to focus on today is resilience at a relationship or probably more relationship community level would probably be more what this is focused on. And the good news is that resilience can happen at multiple levels. So what I want to focus on is how do we maintain relationships and social connectedness to help build resilience? Because what research is showing us is that our support network, our relationships, there's such a strong protective factor against all of those negative consequences. And so when I'm talking about social connectedness, it's the degree to which individuals or groups are socially close, interrelated, or share resources. So this could be in family, this could be in friends, this could be with your colleagues, with your students, in your community. So lots of different ways that we can be socially connected. And I wanted to highlight some of the benefits. So the first one is that it improves physical health. So what we've really learned, I think, from this pandemic is that physical and emotional and mental health are all so connected. We have to pay attention to all of it. When I say social connection, it doesn't necessarily mean physically present with people. It really is more about someone's perceived experience of feeling understood and connected to others. So that's a good thing, right? Especially when we're all in a virtual setting. You know, sometimes you can think, well, we're not going to have any social connection at all, but there are some strategies. Secondly, social connection does help boost our mental health. So when we feel like we belong to a group, it helps give us a sense of purpose. We also have increased levels of happiness, reduced levels of stress, improved self-worth, and confidence. And then on the flip side, when people have insufficient perceived social support, right, when we don't feel like we have that support network, we're more likely to experience mental health challenges like anxiety and depression. So then it's no surprise that having strong social connection does help increase our life expectancy, right? Because it helps just with overall health and wellness, so we actually live longer. And then it's also, again, this is how come I'm focusing on it, is because it does help us in the face of adversity, which makes sense, right? Because if we're facing all of these challenges, but we feel like we're not alone, we can manage those challenges a little bit easier. And again, this also makes sense. So the last one is decreased risk of suicide. And so there are a number of factors that put people at higher or lower risk for suicide. But one important factor is connection, because relationships and social support play a critical role in protecting against suicidal thoughts. So again, it's that, do you feel like you're connected? Do you feel like you have self-worth? Do you feel like you have resources? And so we have a lot of challenges. Some of you mentioned some of the challenges that are going on right now and that keep continuing to go on. So these are just a few that I've been hearing and that tend to come up in some of the articles that I'm reading. So of course, one of the big ones is that we have family and work and school and caregiving. There's all of these things happening in the same space. For other families, stress is coming from having, maybe they have one or more essential employees in the household. So this can be really challenging if there are children in the family, and maybe there's having to figure out, okay, how's childcare going to work? Right, and homeschooling, and then how are things going to be taken care of when maybe people are working outside of the home? You know, in some families, roles are being renegotiated. So one of the examples was, when the pandemic first hit, we had college students were moving back home, Some families lost jobs and maybe families had to move in together. So you had multiple families living together. And so the different roles, and also if people were working at home and some were working outside of the home, maybe those responsibilities that typically were divided a certain way had to change, right? Depending on what the situation was. So that can put stress on families. And then another challenge is just that all of us react to stress differently. And all of us are under a lot more stress now than we were in the past. And so emotions are running high. So people might be getting upset with each other more easily. And this can happen especially when there's a lot more together time than people are used to. So again, going back to memes, I saw this one too. If you're in a household where there's a lot more together time than you're used to, you might look like Christopher Walken here, where every little thing maybe is a little bit more annoying than it used to be in the past. And this can happen even when we love our family, we love the people that we live with, but too much together time can cause some problems. Are any of you, or have you heard from some of the families that you work with? Are there challenges of everything happening in one space? And so it's like the challenges of what the reality actually is going to be, right? It's, maybe people have an idea of what going back to school looks like, right? Because I think we all have this desire to go back to normal. But what we're going back to isn't going to be what we had experienced before the pandemic. So I can see how that can be very stressful, not only for you, but then once the students are there, what are they going to be experiencing? I've heard, trying to teach like something with physical activity, even if you can see your screen, you're far away from it. So you can't really monitor what's going on with the students. None of this has ever happened before. I've heard the analogy, it's like we're trying to build a plane as we're flying it. And so that can be definitely very stressful. Definitely take care of yourselves, because all of these stressors that I'm hearing, I'm, being sort of aware of how it's impacting your body. And then also when we're stressed out about work things, we sometimes bring them home to family. And so hopefully some of these strategies that we're going to talk about here can help protect the family part of what's going on right now, because especially now with everything being like in the same space, like there's more of that where work's influencing our home relationships now, even more than in the past. But in terms of healthy relationships at home, so one of the strategies is having a daily routine. So the reason why this is helpful is because if you remember from the video, it talked about how we get that tunnel vision when we have that stress response. So our brain, when we go into survival mode, we're always looking for danger, for the bad, because it's trying to protect us, right? Our brain is trying to protect us. So we're looking for that danger so that we can escape it. So when we can have a daily routine that actually is reassuring, not only to us, but also to children. And I don't mean like a really strict, regimented routine, but if there's a daily routine where you know what to expect, maybe in the morning time, like this is a morning routine, this is a afternoon routine, this is an evening routine, this is what we do on the weekends. Like just having that daily routine, it helps create a sense of safety, and we know what to expect, especially when everything else is out of our control. If there's certain things that are regular, it does bring comfort. So, and that's for adults and for children. So think about it as structure with flexibility, right? Because you don't want the routine to be so rigid that it causes stress. And this can actually, having a routine can be helpful if you have multiple adults living in the house, where you might have to figure out how to divide things maybe differently than before. And having a routine can also help us make sure that we're meeting our basic needs. So again, what we learned from the pandemic is that physical and mental health are very connected. So another strategy to build resilience, and the routine can help with this, is making sure that we're eating healthy and regularly, that we're getting physical activity, and that we're making sure to get sleep. I'm sure you have had this experience. I know I have, where if I'm hungry, or I'm tired, or if I haven't been sleeping well, small things seem to really upset me more than they would when I'm fed and when I'm moving around and exercising and when I'm getting enough sleep. Right. Sometimes when I don't eat, I'll get hangry more easily. So taking care of those basic needs is huge. And sometimes, and especially if we're very busy at work, it can be very easy to not do that self-care, not do that, take care of our eating, not make sure we're getting enough physical activity, and stay up really late and wake up really early. And so I do want to remind us all that self-care is super important. And I've heard the analogies a couple of different ways. So one is we have to make sure that we put our own oxygen mask on first before we can help others. And also I've heard it as we can't pour from an empty cup, right? If we just keep giving and giving and giving, at some point, something's going to give, and it might be your health. So that self-care, even if it's small, it is super important, because the better we take care of ourselves, the more resilient we are to take care of others. And on the flip side, we become good role models for our children, whether it's your own children or whether it's the students that you work with, because then that models for them how to make sure that they're meeting their needs as well, and that it's important to take care of physical needs for their own emotional well-being. Another strategy is balancing together and alone time. So this can be very challenging if everybody's at home, right? Sure, you might have some strategies, but some that were recommended was if people can find some individual hobbies so that you can maybe separate for at least part of the time, like maybe reading or having headphones on, or maybe some go outside and some are inside. Just having some of those individual hobbies could be a strategy. And then, of course, having open communication. So there may have to be some intentional conversations, right? Again, it might be a little bit awkward, right? Because you love your family and you may not want to mention that you guys are spending too much time together, but figuring out how to have those conversations where, everybody sort of needs some time to decompress and be by themselves, where it's just their own time, even if it's short amounts of time. But if you notice that too much together time is causing you to feel irritated with people, then there might need to be an intentional conversation, even if it is a little awkward. And then some other strategies I found in terms of balancing work and school at home is, if possible, having specific areas, and you talked about these type of things with the students that you work with and their families, is if they can have a specific area that's helpful. I think for teachers, setting boundaries might be a little bit challenging because there's just so much to get done. But again, we have to take care of ourselves so that we can be the best that we can for the people that we work with, the people that we serve. And again, setting boundaries, also you model that for children too. And sometimes we have to be really creative. So I did have someone tell me that it was really hard because, they were trying to work from home and they had a younger child. And so what she ended up having to do, and she was a single mom, and it was really challenging, but she put her workspace in an area where she could watch her child. So she had like a little play area. And so that helped a little bit. And so she had to kind of be creative. I mean, it's not going to be the optimum situation, but for her, that was what she was able to come up with for that time. I'm trying to minimize distractions. I know that can be hard too, but just a few strategies. And again, we've kind of been through experiencing this, and some of you may have really good strategies, but just some of the basic ones are, if you can have headphones that when you're on Zoom conference calls or any type of conference call, it can eliminate some of the background noise. If you don't have a virtual background, trying to position your camera so that you have a wall behind you, so that eliminates distractions of maybe people walking behind you. So that can be a strategy. And then probably the biggest one is managing expectations. So I found the meme on the right. Originally it was, somebody had posted this really detailed schedule of when everything was going to happen. It was like their daily schedule, but it was really rigid. And so then somebody else had scribbled it out and had said, try to keep kids alive while also working from home and pray they don't start fighting while I'm on a conference call. And so I thought that was a really good idea of we have to manage our expectations. Things are not going to be like they were before this pandemic hit, and sometimes good enough is going to have to be okay. because everything's more complicated. At least that's what I'm finding out, is everything takes longer than I think it's going to. Everything takes more steps, and it's not going to be to the level that I was used to in the past. And so I've been having to even let go of what my expectations of my own work has been. But I think it's good practice to be forgiving, because like I said, we're all doing the best that we can, and we can be forgiving of others, but also remember to be forgiving of ourselves. Okay, so then another strategy is to actually be intentional about fun family time. So again, when we think about that stress response, it is very easy because our brain is looking for danger, right? It's primed to look for all of the negative things going on. And so what we have to do is actually be intentional about looking for the positives, looking for the good, and also being intentional about building positive relationships. And one way that we can do that is our interactions, because the more positive interactions we have with those that we love and we care about, the stronger those relationship bonds get. So you can think of these positive interactions, and it doesn't have to be big, right? So these small positive interactions, the more that you have them, it's like building your emotional bank account, right? So if you can have these positive interactions, what you do is you build that emotional bank account so that in challenging situations, you can actually draw from them. And you can actually think of this even with your students, right? If there's ways that you can encourage positive interactions, that really helps with that connection, with that bonding. And so one way to build connection is to have conversations. So this link that I'm sharing with you, it's from the Family Dinner Project. There's all kinds of different conversation starters for all ages. So it has for little ones, it has for older children, it has for adults. It has just all kinds of different questions and ideas for conversations, so that you can start to have interesting conversation, and that builds bonds. Sort of along that idea of conversations as family bonding is also sharing family stories. So if there's ways that you can share, and this can be family history, but it can also be sharing memories of happier times. And so the more that you can remember happy times and happy memories, and the more that you can laugh together, all of that helps with reducing that stress, because any time that we can build those positive emotions and memories, that really helps us out. So sharing family stories, cooking or baking together can also be really fun. And then since we have teachers on here, so you can think of it as educational too, because children learn math, science. If you're talking about maybe family history and family recipes, you can even learn about language and culture. So it can all be tied to preparing food. And then sometimes even what I've heard parents of teenagers especially say is that sometimes cooking together actually opens up conversations. So they're more likely to talk. So that's an idea. Another one is going outside. So this could be walking, gardening, playing in the backyard. And what research is showing now is how important being outside or being in nature is to mental health. So if there's opportunities to do that, not only does it help build a positive family experience, but it's just good in general for helping with that mental health, just being outside or maybe going on a hike. Those type of things are helpful. And we can be creative. So there's art, music, crafts, dancing. I've heard people tell me that even dancing while they're washing dishes or dancing as they're doing laundry, just putting on some music and dancing has been helpful. And playing games. So this could be things like puzzles. It can be board games. There's even apps. So it can be electronic games. Lots of different ideas. Taking virtual chores online. So if you can't travel, maybe there's ways that you can do that as a family online and just see different things and talk about them. And then writing journals or letters. I included this one because not only is it something that families can do, but the reason why I highlighted it is because especially in difficult times, writing out our experiences in journals can be very therapeutic. So it can help us process some of the challenges that are going on. And then there's also, again, because our brains right now when we're stressed, we tend to look for the negative and the danger. We can also practice looking for positives and also things to be grateful for. So some people use gratitude journals, or for the letters, they'll start writing appreciation letters, either to each other or maybe to others. I've heard even people doing this for healthcare workers, but just writing appreciation letters. And that also helps build that positive emotion. And then if the family does it together, that could be a good family experience.
The idea of having weekly meetings, and so having adult friends support you and reading to the child or doing paintings, things like that. It takes a village, right? Well, it takes a village online as well to support the family. Luis also sent another message talking about how he takes his toddler outside and keeps the baby from bouncing off the walls. That sunlight is definitely very good for the soul.
Great ideas. Thank you all for sharing. We're all just trying to figure out what works, right? Thank you. I appreciate the feedback. And then the last strategy that I have on here is starting new rituals and traditions. So I've seen this with starting birthday parades and having Zoom birthday parties. And so there's creative ways now of recognizing milestones. So I think any way that we can recognize milestones or special events is good. And so we can start these new traditions. One that I didn't mention on here, but a friend of mine had mentioned, is what they do in their family is each family member will think of some fun activities that they like to do and write it down on a piece of paper and put it in a jar. And so whenever they're trying to think of something that they can do, because right, you can like run out of ideas, that'll help jog their memory of some fun things that they like to do. So that was just another idea. And I wanted to share this slide. So this is called Connecting with Children, but I thought it's really great advice for any relationship. So it doesn't necessarily mean you can only do these with children. I think they're good for all of us. They're good reminders. So one that I wanted to highlight, it's probably on the second column. It says, say sorry. So we all lose patience and make mistakes. Acknowledge it, apologize, and repair relationships. It's up to us to show kids we're responsible for our moods and mistakes. So I thought this was a really good reminder because as we're all really stressed out, I think sometimes we lose our temper a little bit more quickly than we used to in the past. And this is just a good reminder that apologizing and making those relationship repairs is a really good habit. And it's a good habit to show our children too. I've had to do this more often than I used to in the past, but I think it's a good reminder for all of us. And then give 20-second hugs. So again, hugs are really helpful. And then I like the reminder underneath that suggestion, it says slow down or stop. So I think this is a good reminder for all of us that resting, taking breaks, even if they're short, anything that we can do to recover is super important. And then hunt for the good. So when there's pain or trauma, we look for danger. We can practice looking for joy and good stuff too. So again, it's just kind of practicing using those neural pathways in our brain to practice looking for joy and good stuff. So sometimes we have to be intentional because when we're stressed out, our brain may not naturally go that way. And then be there for kids. It's hard to see our kids in pain. We can feel helpless, but simply being present with our kids is doing something. It shows them that we're in their corner. And so again, it reminds us that we can't always fix everything, but just being there and supporting is helpful and is important. And then help kids to express mad, sad, and hard feelings. Hard stuff happens, but helping kids find ways to share, talk, and process helps. Our kids learn from us. And actually, talking about emotions is not only important for children, but also for all of us. And so managing emotions, this could be a whole lesson in and of itself, but I just wanted to highlight a few things. Just practicing identifying feelings. So this is a chart. You can go online and there's lots of feeling charts, emotion charts online. But this is just an example. We can also help our children or your students or even yourself connect the feelings to reasons. So that helps. It's like thinking through like what are the emotions that we're actually feeling? What are the causes of those emotions? And then actually talking about them. So the more that we can talk about emotions, it helps us be able to manage them a little bit better. And so just getting into that practice, and especially because now I think we may be feeling a lot of conflicting emotions and they may be very complex. And so this actually becomes even more important. And I've heard some teachers talk about how they'll do like check-ins, like a weather check. So it's just kind of seeing how students are feeling, just kind of checking in and practicing emotion words, feeling words. So that could be a strategy. Another strategy for managing that stress response is called mindfulness. And so mindfulness, again, this could be a whole workshop in and of itself, but it really just means to be in the moment, fully present without judgment, right? So you're in the moment. So it's sort of, if you can see the image of the person walking the dog, and you can see the person is probably super anxious and thinking about everything that they have to do, or maybe they're worried about things that happened in the past. Whereas the dog is just in the moment enjoying being out in nature. So is your mind full, or are you being mindful? And so the more that we can practice mindfulness, it does help link our emotional brain and our rational brain. So it does help us be able to calm that stress response a little bit more easily. And there's lots of ways to practice mindfulness, but one example is breathing. And so again, this is something that you might be able to do with your students, a short breathing activity. And this works for all ages. So Sesame Street even has an Elmo belly breathe video that works with little ones. Or you can, if you have older students, you might be able to do something like this. And so I'm going to play a short, it's less than a minute video. And all you'll do is follow the directions that are inside the bubble. Okay, so hopefully that helped all of you maybe calm down, and I know that I always feel a little bit more relaxed after seeing that, especially because it's out in nature. But lots of different options. I mean, you can look online and there's so many different activities for all ages, and it really is just trying to kind of calm that response and recenter. I did want to just really briefly show this slide, and it's just suggestions for connecting virtually. So that's been another challenge, is that we're not connected to people the way that we used to be. So we have to be creative and figure out how can we stay connected in this new virtual setting. And so there has been some research on long distance relationships that has shown that if you can connect with people in multiple ways, that actually helps build strong bonds. So for example, including phone calls, video chats, texting, audio files, letter writing. If there's just multiple methods that you use, that helps. And then just a reminder to check in virtually. I think somebody mentioned having weekly meetings, but yeah, just remembering to check in with people. You might even just send a text, just say, hey, just checking in on you, wanted to make sure you're okay. And then that helps with that connection and maintaining your social support network. And some people have mentioned joining online communities. There may be groups, especially for teachers, where you might be able to share ideas or even just vent or just have that support. So joining online communities can help building your own support network. And then volunteering online. One of the benefits to volunteering, it really helps us feel like we're giving back. And so there might be creative ways to volunteer from home, and it may be even a class project if you have older students, so there's examples of different ways that you might be able to have connection to community, to sort of the larger outside world through online methods. And the volunteering, I included that because if we can feel useful or helpful to others, it has shown to be beneficial to our own emotional and mental well-being. Maybe you found an idea here from either from the presentation or for a colleague that you want to try, or maybe you have one that you would like to share. And then I also wanted to include some resources. So again, unfortunately, families are experiencing so many different challenges at this time. And so if we can connect people to resources that maybe help alleviate some of that stress, it is helpful. And so I just included a few resources on here, on this slide. And then on this one that I wanted to highlight in particular is the New Mexico Crisis and Access Line. And they also have an app. And so if you go onto the website, you can actually download an app where it connects you. People can text, can call. There's also a list of community resources on there. And what I tend to reinforce is the idea that, again, physical and mental health are connected, and they're both extremely important. And just like we go see a doctor when we have an illness or a broken bone, when there's something wrong and we need that extra support, we go see a doctor. And the same is true for our mental health. So sometimes there's this stigma about, not wanting to reach out to a mental health professional, but I really see them as the same. So just like you go see a doctor for physical health, you can see a professional for mental and emotional well-being. So just wanted to send that as a message that I try to promote. And then, of course, you may already have these numbers for Child Protective Services, for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, but just always good to have those resources in case you ever need to connect someone to them.
Thank you, of course, Dr. Martinez, for this wonderful presentation and for the gentle reminders that we have to put on our oxygen mask so that we can help other people. So that was one big takeaway for me. So thank you all so much for coming.
It was great. Thank you again for the invitation.